Welcome into another edition of the Gig 'em 24/7 Sports Podcast. I am Andrew Hattersley, lucky to be joined again today by Josh Pate, fresh off a trip to College Station where he got to sit down with Mike Elko for 37 minutes, which was a lot of great stuff in there. I highly recommend folks go check it out. It's on YouTube. We'll have it on our board as well, but definitely recommend folks go check it out. Josh, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me. It was good to be down there. I got there as we recorded it one day after those lines of storms came through, which means it was like
Yes.
50-mile-an-hour winds the next day, which everyone who lives there knows exactly what I'm talking about. So it was tough driving, even though it was completely sunny outside, but it was a
Yep.
good time. We got you said the interview itself, I think, was about 37 minutes. We were
Yeah.
probably in there 2 hours. Really, really good access. They're always good to us there. So it was good to get a nice sort of raising of the hood of the 2025 Texas A&M team.
No doubt, no doubt. And I know those storms actually hit us up here in Dallas too, and was out without power for a couple days, without internet. So certainly something that reached throughout the state. I was mentioning before when you kind of look at Mike Elko, right? Like this is one of the first opportunities we've got to hear from him since the end of the season. Since that Las Vegas Bowl loss to USC, and we're going to hear from him obviously in a couple weeks when spring practice gets underway. But just wondering, when you look at, obviously getting to talk to him and spend some time around the program, what were maybe some of the biggest things that struck you or you took away from that time?
I think how how diligent they are about where they are in their process. I use this word. This is not his word, but I always use the word installation of a program. And I
Yeah.
remember we were there for the Missouri game this past year. I was over there at the building on Friday. I remember sitting in his office and, like conversations off the record, but like the general theme of it was I'm always curious with first year guys, how much can you really get implemented in year one? And,
Yeah.
most of them, including him, will be honest with you. And it's varying degrees of less than 100%. Some of them say half, some say 75%, but they were very much in the process. And I think they had lost that Notre Dame game early in the year, which got some people's attention. Then you get full buy-in. Well, then you go on to blow out Missouri. Then everyone's attention is sort of regotten nationally. Okay, they're coming back to watch A&M. And then they lost games down the stretch. So it's just from the outside looking in, it looks like up and down and up and down. But really, from his perspective, I think what's really interesting and good to hear is it's all kind of linear. It's all baked in. That's all part of the process of getting where they ultimately want to be. I also think, and we can talk about this if you want to, but I think every time I've talked to Mike Elko on or off camera, he's always been willing to be brutally honest about where maybe previously the program has dipped a little bit in talent, partially talent evaluation, but really talent development. And the evidence of that is crystal clear every NFL draft day when you see a lot of what was a former 4 and 5 star laden class not producing
Yep.
first and second round draft picks.
That was actually on my notes to bring up with you about, because I found his answer about the NFL draft where he talked about, developing NFL draft talent. And you look at that 2022 class, right? That's the one everybody kind of looks at. If you look at it, Shamar Stewart, Bryce Anderson, and Le'Veon Moss are really the only guys that kind of started their career at A&M, are either still there or haven't transferred out or gone elsewhere. Do you think when he was talking about that, because I kind of took it as he was talking more about we need to develop the talent better in terms of we need to evaluate guys and develop it better. Do you think there's kind of what did you make of that answer specifically?
Yeah, 80% of what he's saying is we got to develop guys better.
Yeah.
It's maybe in the past, not him really, because he's still brand new there, but he's speaking holistically about how the program may have been pretty good at going and getting big names, but what are you doing with them once you get them on campus? Now,
Right.
if you're him, you can't waste a lot of time worrying about that. It was out of your control. Like you weren't the head coach there, but you are now. So you can control what you do now moving forward. But I also think the other part of that is I'm a big believer in a general sense, Andrew, that the star rating system is as solid as it's ever been, but it's never
Yeah.
perfect. It's never infallible. So I do think sometimes I take what he's saying to mean, let's look at this high 4 star we got. Who did we beat for him? Because all due respect, there's a big difference in beating Texas and Alabama for a kid versus beating out Oklahoma State, and Arizona for a kid.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I say that with mountains of respect towards those programs and to the kid, that we're talking about, even though it's generic. And I think a lot of cases in the past of those classes, you may have gone and you may have found some highly rated kids, but you weren't beating out who you'd assume you beat out for those kids, if that makes any sense. So are
Right.
you getting the right highly rated kids coming in on the front end? And then what are you doing with them while they're there? I think those are the two components he's talking about.
When I was down at the All-American Bowl, we talked a little bit about, I talked with Andrew Ivins and Cooper Patagno and Tom Loy about kind of Mike Elko really seems to have like a philosophy and a plan in place. And, it goes from recruiting and, guys that they may take as low 3 stars or, low 4 stars that they really believe in terms of their kind of evaluation point. Do you get the same sense when talking to him about his plan, and he's kind of got this plan that this is, I know where this program where I want it to go, and can kind of block out the noise? Or how do you kind of take it in terms of his plan in place?
Yeah, I would put him up there as one of the best in the country at that, actually. And I talked to
Yeah.
a lot of them. I think his time at Duke serves him very well here, in a sense that you knew you weren't working with the resources at Duke that you ended up having at Texas A&M. But what that forced you to do is be a supreme evaluator of talent. He didn't become that at Duke. It just showed itself at Duke. And then you had to really rigidly define your development process. So there's no guessing. There's no, I'll get the A&M job and we'll figure it out on the fly. And he's really intentional when he talks. There is no, looking at the ceiling a little bit and kind of trying to find his way through an answer. You can tell, honestly, about 60% of your way through a question to Mike Elko, he's already got the answer. And it's not that he's cocky or arrogant or anything. It's just he's already been through it in his own head a million times. So he knows where he's going. He knows what his process or procedure is. He knows what the program's values are. He knows what the principles are. And when you know that, you do have an answer to every question. You may not always be right, but you do have an answer, which is one of the best testaments that you can give to a head coach or a leader, period, is they've always got an answer. Nothing's really taken them by surprise.
Yeah. Thought that kind of came out too when you talked with him about, hey, when you're recruiting and a kid asks for something crazy and or you need to kind of scramble on the fly, and he kind of mentioned that they've already had those meetings ahead of time and kind of know maybe where they're going in terms of the defense, because I think you guys touched on that kind of at the end of the conversation. I got the sense that there's going to be some and kind of what we've heard as well is there's going to be some significant changes on that side of the ball. Just wondering what you'll be looking for heading into year 2 on that side of the ball with Mike Elko kind of taking more control on the defensive side.
That what you actually said, that's what I'm looking at. I wondered about that in year 1. I remember doing a specific segment about A&M on our show last summer. And I remember specifically talking about how I would rate the coaching staff. And, if you're trying to rate the defensive coordinator position, I said, if Elko is the play caller there, then this is a 4-star, et cetera, rated defensive staff or whatever. So I still think that. And it sounds like that's going to be the dynamic this year. Now, the follow-up to that is, we didn't really get into it that much, but the follow-up to that is, okay, well, how does that change the machinations of your program? What previously did you have on your plate that you have to remove? Or could it be that year 2, you don't have quite as much on your plate because you're not getting something off the ground? You're trying to get to cruising altitude instead. They don't like that phrasing because cruising altitude means complacency, and you don't want that. But I think also, even if there was no change like that, you just blindly expect improvement year 1 to year 2. That's been an age-old concept in college football. But I just want to see. Here's how I always look at that. If I follow A&M day to day, I know about the headlines. I know who's calling what and position coaches. But let's say I live in Omaha, Nebraska, and I just watch A&M a couple of times a year. Can I see a difference? If I can see the difference, that means the stuff's worked. Like if I don't have to go and flip through pages in a program or look things up on the internet, if it just jumps out at me, that's how you know you made the right moves.
No doubt. And wanted to get your thoughts on A&M's schedule, right? Because it feels such a different conversation from last year to this year. Everybody kind of looked at the 2025 schedule, fair or not, with Mike Elko coming in as a first year head coach and said, hey, this is the year A&M needs to get to the playoffs with a 12-team playoffs. You've got LSU coming in, you've got Notre Dame, Texas, Missouri obviously coming in. Next year, they have one home game, SEC home game after October 11th, and that'll be South Carolina coming in. Just wondering what you kind of feel about the expectations of A&M heading into year two with that schedule, maybe looking a little bit different, and obviously the road schedule specifically. You've got to go to those spots now. Just wondering what you think about kind of A&M's expectations heading into year two.
Yeah, I'm not distracted here. I'm actually looking down at their schedule. I didn't
Yeah,
realize that until you just said that. I didn't realize the one home game or one conference home game after what is it, October 11th. Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
yeah,
So that means you better get all your wins early. I
yeah,
think the Notre Dame game becomes weird because that's an out of conference game, obviously. But
right.
yet, if you lose that when you've already got one loss before conference play starts, and you know that you got that lineup. I think also though there are a lot of teams in the conference this year that are hopeful at quarterback but not proven. Even
Yeah,
Texas is like that. So I think any given schedule that looks tough right now could either be totally validated or could end up completely hollow because you're counting, like if you play Alabama, they don't, but if you play Alabama, you kind of just assume, all right, Bama's going to be good because quarterback will work out. But what if it doesn't? Well, then Bama's very
yeah,
beatable. I think that about 3 or 4 of the teams on the schedule right now. So for all we know, they're going to have one of the toughest schedules in the conference. But you never know how that quarterback thing's going to break for the accumulation of opponents on your schedule. And if it doesn't break positively for those teams, and it does for you, you could be sitting
yeah.
there 10-2, and you and your buddies are saying, wow, man, if you told me this in July, I would have signed up for it all day long.
No doubt. And what wanted to get your thoughts because obviously when we talked a little bit about this before the Texas game, but Marcel Reed now heading into year two. What were your thoughts when you looked at how he played in the Texas game, how he played in the USC game, just what you saw from him overall year one, and whether he can potentially be the guy moving forward?
Yeah, mixed bag is the best way to put that. Year one, I think what I would look at is I would ask, did I get shown some things I can build his game around or I can build my offense around? And I do
Yeah,
think the answer there is yes. Now, it may not be the same bag of tools you've always counted on your quarterback having, but what I think is if we go back to what we just talked about, which
yeah,
is conference is not littered with proven talent at quarterback, that makes it a different ballgame. Because I actually talked to Elko a little bit about this after we were done. If you were looking around the landscape and there were 2 former Heisman Trophy finalists coming back, and then there's another 5-star All-American here, well, then it'd be different because then it's an uphill battle.
right.
What do you know about the conference? You think DJ Lagway is going to be really good. You think Lenora Sellers is going to be really good. I think both of those are on the schedule, by the way. Garrett Nussmeier is back at LSU. We're not looking around at a Bryce Young. There's not a Tim Tebow. Like there's not a Joe Burrow out there on the landscape. So to me, in an ironic way, that's the beauty of college football. And you may listen to that and say, what's beautiful about that? I want to know what I have. Well, yes, if I were an A&M fan, that's how I'd feel. But if I'm just a general college football fan, the unknown, like not knowing and knowing that there's going to be some great story somewhere this year where a guy goes from virtual no name nationally to he's right in the thick of all the awards races. That stuff happens every year. You just have to ask, okay, is this the year it happens here?
Yeah, no doubt. And wanted to get your final thoughts on this. Just when you look at it, feels like there's so much more kind of moving dominoes again within the college football playoff. And where do you think we kind of are right now in the college football landscape with talk about the playoff changing again and all that? What are the big things that you're kind of looking for over the next 12 months, maybe in terms of college football that you kind of think need to get ironed out, obviously?
Well, first off, I think we're all really interested to see if there are any changes to the 2025 format because
Yeah.
that season's not that far away. But then beyond that, everybody knows that the 2026 format, that we kind of got two waterfalls on the horizon.
Yeah.
2026, no one can see past that right now because no one firmly knows what the format's going to be. Let's find that out. And then beyond that, I think it's a little ways down the road, but 2031 is going to be the blow up year for college football.
Yeah.
And again, you can say that's a long way down the road, but I was thinking about this last night. I just mentioned Joe Burrow and LSU. Everyone still remembers that season, that Ed Orgeron national title year. It's still kind of fresh in people's minds. That was 6 years ago, Andrew. So that's as far behind us as 2031 is ahead of us. So it's not that far away. That's the year all the media rights deals come up. That's the year the big boys in the ACC just renegotiated their opt-out number to get down to affordable levels. So it looks like, the Great Reset is a phrase that's been used way too often in history, but that's sort of the Great Reset button part of college football. And I also think that there's been a lot of negativity around a lot of things in the sport. People have problems with the playoff. I do too. People have had problems with portal, NIL. I have too. You never know, like, is it just going downwards forever, or is there a dip? And then do you have sort of a resurgence and the right people get in the decision-making chairs at the right time? And I'm not saying college football is in some nosedive or anything like that, but does someone sort of pull the nose up a little bit and make everyone look around and go, it wasn't thrilling when we were going through it, but turns out it was all for the better. We're okay now.
No doubt. Josh, thanks so much again for joining us. Always great stuff. And again, I highly recommend folks head over to check out that Mike Elko interview. There's a lot of great stuff in there, and appreciate you taking a few minutes.
I appreciate you having me.